Welcome back to the Talking Archive. I'm Josh Jacobs, and our conversation continues now with Gary Mora, voiceover talent as well as radio personality on KYARadio.com. And last time we talked about how oldies radio is not as prevalent as it used to be, especially music from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. My dad's wife's youngest granddaughter, she's now 36 years old. But when she was about 18 years old, she got an Elvis tattoo on her arm. And I was like, wow, Cassidy loves oldies music. That's interesting. And, but no, you're right. I mean, a lot of people do. And unfortunately in Southern California, I'm not sure what it's like in the Bay Area right now, but there is no oldies format with, 50s and 60s and early 70s music. It's just not there anymore. The classic hits like K-Earth 101, which used to play oldies, although they did play the same 101 oldies over and over again. I'll go on and rant on that in a second. They're now playing 80s, 90s, and a touch of 70s.
Well, those are considered oldies now, believe it or not. They are.
Yeah.
I find that hard to believe, but it's true.
I think the closest oldies format you got in Southern California is in the Palm Springs area. It's Me TV 103.1, which plays a variety of 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Music. It's kind of a hodgepodge, but it did have some tracks I hadn't heard in a long time. But it's probably nothing compared to KYA, which you're doing online. And so let me ask you: you had a bunch of top 40 hit parades from KYA from back in the day, from its inception in 1958 until the 1970s. What percentage of the songs from those hit parades are you playing right now on KYA?
We would have to talk to David F. Jackson, who is the general manager and my music director as well. He really follows all of that. I give suggestions, but it's a tremendous playlist. It's a really good one. And the ones that chart the highest are the ones that get the most airplay. But people like Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys has written, loves the format. There's just a ton of people that write about it, that write to us about how much they love what we're doing. But it's very similar to what KYA was doing for all those years. It's a flashback. We're actually playing the original commercials from back in the day.
Wow.
With Paul Tom Campbell. And I'm trying to come up with names now. Johnny Holiday, who was a big name. He's a sportscaster now in New York, back east. But the actual Chris Edwards was a big name in San Francisco radio. You can hear all his commercials. It's really fun. It's a ball. Plus all the old Coca-Cola commercials. There are even cigarette commercials, which is a mind blower. So it's so much fun to listen to. It's the San Francisco Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame. When they asked me if I would host it, this is 16 years ago. I was already doing television, voiceover for everything. And I didn't know if I could do a radio show again because it had been several years. But it was so easy for me to get right back. They put a studio in my home, and I'm able to do it right from here. So that makes it so much better.
That's great.
Yeah, it's working out really well. And I still have a passion. I just love that music. For 20 years, I traveled around the world with the big rock groups and my own oldies roadshow. We had the Drifters. We had all kinds of groups with me, but we also just brought turntables, and I brought dancers and vintage cars and lighting. It was very theatrical, and I still can't believe we went 20 years and did the biggest parties anywhere. I mean, there were just thousands of people, including downtown San Rafael. Each year, they hired me to do kind of a remembrance of American graffiti. And we would get like 50,000 people in the streets dancing and singing. And picture Ferris Bueller's Day Off when he's standing up in that parade. And that's what this was like. And George Lucas would show up. Terry McGovern, who was in the movie, Scott Beach. They were in the movie. And I tried to get Wolfman, but he had his own jet and was flying around, baby, all over the country. And it was not easy to get him. I said, come on. And when I'd work with him, he'd say, you're doing a good job, Gary. I said, "Hey, man, how about you get up off your backside?" And he said he would just be eating and drinking whiskey with a young chick, his arm around a 20-year-old. And he would wear a cape, Wolfman would. And towards the end, he dyed his beard like a skunk. It had the white, black, white. Oh, my, it was a kick. I really looked forward to the times we worked together. Kept me in stitches.
Oh, yeah.
I just wish he would work a little harder,
Now, have some of the old KYA jocks who are still with us, like Tall Tom Campbell and Johnny Holiday, how often do they guest host on the online format?
Well, we have voicers. I don't have Tom, but Johnny Holiday mentions the call letters, and let's see who else. Tommy Saunders, who was a big name, is also heard on the station. My best friend is gone, so I couldn't get him. Russ the Moose Syracuse, who was very famous here in the Bay Area, and he was one of my best friends, but he passed many years ago.
Tell about your memories of Russ the Moose Syracuse, because I was reading a little bit about him on BayAreaRadio.org. What are your favorite memories of Russ?
Just his humor and the twinkle in his eyes, and it was tough to be on a diet with him because he would always say, "Let's go to to lunch or dinner, or come over to the apartment. I'll cook you spaghetti." So just nothing. I think of the word fun when I think of Russ, and how hilarious he was on the air. Oh my gosh, he was a funny guy. People thought during the hippie era when he was on KYA years ago that he was stoned or that he was doing drugs, and he said to them at the Family Dog, a hippie place on stage, they hired him because they thought he'd be hilarious, and he was, but he said, "The only thing I'm high on is cheeseburgers." And that's it. He said maybe a Coca-Cola or two, and that he lost that long after that. They were all doing acid, But he was just naturally hilarious. And one of our friends, Ben Fong Torres, I don't know if you know the name.
I do, yeah.
From Rolling Stone. He was the editor, but he was also with our group. I sure miss those lunches with these wonderful musical people. So much fun. Then I became friends with the guys over at KFRC. Dave Sholin, and there's so many great talents in the Bay Area.
Did you ever get to meet Dr. Don Rose?
Yes, very much so. He was a buddy. And as a matter of fact, I'm keeping his memory alive on Facebook. I'm posting the corniest puns imaginable. Corny-ass puns is what I call them. And people love it. Because I don't know if you ever heard him, but
I have, yeah.
Made up just silly, funny puns throughout the day. And he was another monster ratings getter in San Francisco. Just very famous, very popular, and a sweet, sweet man who hated to get off the air. He had health problems. He lost a leg, and he broadcast from home, much like Mel Blanc, got in a horrible car accident, was in bed, he told me, and they thought he was a goner until the doctor finally said, "Bugs, are you in there?" While Mel was in bed, and he started talking to the doctor in Bugs Bunny's voice, and that slowly but surely brought him out of a coma. So he attributes the rest of his life to Bugs Bunny. He said, I'll never forget that little chump from the Bronx.
Or as Mel himself even called, "I'm a little stinker."
Yeah. But the best part of being with Mel Blanc in his class and with him one-on-one was when I asked him to do Tweety Bird. To see an older man speaking like that little Tweety it brought tears to my eyes with laughter. What a kick. Oh, my gosh.
I'm sure he say, I taught to put eat that.
Yeah. I don't know how he pulled all those voices out. He was called the man of 1,000 voices, and he sure proves it. I've never seen anyone come close to what he could do. Just phenomenal. Today, somebody posted on my Facebook page a clip of Mel Blanc when he was with Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show. And if anyone goes to my page, it's Gary Mora. You can look at it. It's hilarious. And he does a lot of the voices. So
wow,
that was sweet of one of my listeners to send that to me today. That was great.
So the website is GaryMora.com. And
well, that's my voiceover. The Facebook page is, well, there are a couple of them. KYARadio.com. You can listen to me right now on the radio. GaryMora.com is my voiceover page. And what else? My Facebook page, if you just put in Gary Mora in Facebook, there's some fun. It's all humor. It's music. It's a lot of famous people check in. My idea is to have fun. I don't care. I don't think anybody cares what I had for breakfast. So many people put their dinners, and which is okay, and that's much better than politics. No politics on my site, my Facebook site. It's just entertainment, just fun. So I spend a couple hours a day getting the funniest memes. I have a lot of comedians that are friends that send me stuff too. So it's just fun, pure fun. Huh?
Oh, yeah. What's interesting is that we were talking about Don Rose and Bill Earl, who wrote the book When Radio Was Boss, was scrapbook, and then wrote the Carol A. definitive history called Dream House. He said that Dr. Don Rose used to feed the family dog whatever they were having for dinner, and we always talk about it every morning. So Dr. Don did talk about his food, but usually it was in the context of what the dog ate.
I can still see him. I had so much fun with that guy. He was just a real sweet man. And more in love. Well, Jim Lang was the other guy that absolutely adored show business. As a matter of fact, that was his nickname, Captain Showbiz.
Wow.
Jim. Yeah, he just loved it. And it was so much fun to watch those guys work.
In fact,
great.
Jim seemed to love radio even more than television. He loved television, but he says, well, the great thing about radio, first of all, you don't have to shave, which I just busted up laughing when I heard him say that. But he's right.
He was amazing because he lived on candy bars and cigarettes when I'd be with him in the morning show. And yet he looked great.
Yeah.
He was good. He was great looking on TV and just a high energy. And it was always pushing himself to do more and more. And he's another guy that I miss so much. So many good buddies, you know.
Wow, candy bars and cigarettes. I didn't imagine him being a smoker even. Of course.
Oh, he was a heavy smoker.
Wow.
Heavy. But Sherwood was a heavy smoker and a heavy drinker. He ran over a woman in his Cadillac. This is before I was at KSFO, and actually dragged her a few feet. And it turned out it was a Superior Court judge's daughter. And when he found out it was Don Sherwood, he said, "Oh, that's okay. She's just got a few scratches." Can you imagine if you did that?
Oh my
you
goodness!
Couldn't get away with it. And he had a mountain lion in the back seat of his car. I work with some fun people, man. You didn't dare go near his car. Oh my!
Well, considering,
and he ended up when he came back as operator. He said, "I will go back on the air." This is the early '70s. If you make me the general manager, operation manager, and have my own office, which they gave him everything. And he was so paranoid that he had them take out the front glass in our lobby and pull up bulletproof glass, which I thought was really weird. I think it's because I think it was Jim Dunbar, was shot at KGO, which was our right up the street station, another popular station. That probably made him very nervous. But he had an open bar policy every Friday. He told me, "Gare, go in, make yourself comfortable, and have a drink or two." And between that and the Tonga room, which was right across the hall, there's a guy named Phil Harris, who was a major star, and came into our studio for an interview. And he said, "Hey, kid," because I was about early 20s, "go get me some Jack Daniels." So I came back with a glass of Jack Daniels and put it down. And Lon Simmons was getting ready to interview him. And he said, "This is all you got me?" I said, "Yeah, that you said get me the bottle." So I had to go back. I gave him an entire bottle. He said, "Now we're talking. Let's go with the interview." So how I didn't end up in AA, I was around rummies all the time. But whoever heard of doing that when you're working, you know, that's all we did is have fun. We had a ball.
It's funny you mention that because my neighbor up the street laid telephone line for a living. And one of the places he laid telephone line in was the 1020 KGBS, the Los Angeles Music Machine. And the morning team there was Hudson and Landry, Emperor Bob Hudson and Ron Landry.
Oh, they were great, yes.
And one day the record player somehow got unplugged underneath. And so they were on the air live and they couldn't turn the record player on. So Ron goes on the air and says, I'm gonna plug the record player back in. And Hudson's like, hey, don't knock down those jugs of wine underneath when you're down there. And he said there actually were a bunch of jugs of wine underneath the console. That was not make-believe. That was not theater of the mind. That actually did. That really was there.
I have other stories, but I don't want to say them because I might get sued. They're just hilarious. I think the people have approached me to write a book because it would have everything to do with rock and roll, sports. We were with the biggest sports people in the country all the time popping in. Don Rickles was always stopping by for comedy, movie stars. So I'm thinking, I'm just lazy, but what stories? Oh, my God. Don Rickles and Steve Lawrence, they asked me if I would take them on a tour of the Fairmont Hotel, where our studio was, which I did. And I swear, I've never cried with laughter so much as the time I walked alongside Don on one side and Steve Lawrence. Steve was buckled over. Don made fun of everybody.
Oh, yeah.
The poor girl in the elevator, everybody. And it was just a ball. So that could go in the book. That would be fun.
Oh, definitely.
It was just one thrill. As the Moose used to say, those thrills just keep on coming. And they did. They really did.
I remember back about 40 years ago, Don Rickles and Steve Lawrence together hosted ABC's version of Bloopers and Practical Jokes, which Dick Clark and Ed McMahon were doing on NBC. It was called Fallops, Bleeps, and Blunders. It was hilarious.
Oh, that's right.
And they had British TV personality Noel Edmonds on every other week or so to talk about some of the crazy things happening in England. I didn't know who Noel Edmonds was until watching that show. And then years later, I found out he hosted the British version of Deal or No Deal, which was on before we had it here in America.
I didn't know that. Wow.
And, but the show is different than Bloopers. Like, they go to Universal Studios where the show is made and ask a question. And Don Rickles said, here's the question we asked. How big are Dolly Parton's beep, beep? And I was like, about 3 inches, 3 feet, 4 feet. And then after all these responses, the question we asked them was, how big are Dolly Parton's wigs?
I wonder if I can find that show on YouTube. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've looked. I think maybe there's 1 or 2 episodes. It was a Bob Booker production, I remember, and but it was
some investigating.
Yeah, it would definitely because did they tour oftentimes as a comedy duo unofficially, or were they just best friends? They happened to be hanging out with you?
They were really best friends. They were great friends. And Bob Newhart was also part of that group. But I remember talking with both Don and Steve Lawrence, and they were more like brothers. I mean, they loved each other's humor, cracked up at everything each one would say, and it was so much fun to be with them. It was great. And also to be a tour guide for those two guys. Oh, my gosh. What a ball.
And I read Bob Newhart had the story about when I'm not sure whether Bob and his wife Jenny were married yet or they're engaged, but the first time they met Don Rickles like, who's this whore with Bob Newhart? And it's like, that's when we became friends that day. Only Don Rickles could get away with something like that.
Either loved him or hated him. I loved his humor.
Oh, he was great.
He always brought tears to my eyes. What a fun. And then to be able to be with him.
This is the Talking Archive. I'm Josh Jacobs. We're talking with radio personality and voiceover talent Gary Mora. And next time he shares more stories about some great celebrities who he got to meet over the years.